Welcome, Hop Nation. Today I'm very excited to have friend Mark Roberts on the call today. Welcome, Mark.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure. Thank you. Mark has well over 30 years of sales experience. He's a good friend of a previous guest on the show, Ed Wallace of Relational Capital Group and the founder of the RQ Assessment. Mark is the CEO and owner of OTD Solutions and No Smoke and Mirrors, and is known for the science of sales. So Mark, tell us first a bit more about kind of your background and what gave you a passion for sales and business strategy too, because as much as we're honing in today on sales, in a lot of the conversation, it's about the broader business strategy and that, and how sales drives that.
Yeah, as you said, I'm kind of like known as the data-driven guy, right? For years, CEOs have said, I wish my sales would run like my plant. You know, I do a couple strategic inputs and I get the outputs that I desire. Well, the good news is it can if we treat it like a science and not so much of an art. So I've been in sales 36 years. I've worked for very large companies like Timken, Frito-Lay, but I've also served mid-market and small companies. But the model that I use, and again, you referenced it, I call it no smoke and mirrors, just for the lack of a better term. I happened upon it back in the late 90s. I was working for a plastics company, and our mission was to grow 20% a year, minimum. And the only way we could do that is conquering new markets, identifying new products. And the only way you could do that effectively and efficiently is ask your customers, right? So we created a model where we go out, we do market research, and then you assess your team. Does my sales team have the capabilities to do what we're about to do? And if not, close a few of those gaps and then launch. And that little plastics company went from 4 million, we sold it for 300 million. And once you've done that, it's like an addiction. So where I'm really blessed is I have a lot of clients now that want to grow 20, 30, 40, 50%. I have one client that needs to double by 2024. Those are the kind of people I help. I use a data-driven approach. Let's look at what we've got and then identify the current state, identify the future state you want, and then we collaborate. Let's strategically get there with a really strong strategy and tactics.
I love it. And as you know, I mean, HOP is all about using data and insights to drive, the performance improvements we're looking for. So, I mean, that's a direct hit for this audience and that. I want to talk about something that really drove me to say, Mark, we need to get you on the show here. And we were talking about the different types of salesmen. And you had said there's 4 types now, and we always hear about hunters and farmers when it comes to sales, but you've introduced the fisherman and the babysitter. And, first, quick overview on hunter versus farmer. And then, for the audience, I really want us to dig in on the fisherman and babysitter, and we'll probably go babysitter first because the unique one that's very timely is this fisherman salesperson. And in all the exec coaching and conversations I've had with people who may not even be in the sales function, but within multinational companies, we're seeing the need for that sort of salesperson. So, hunter farmer, what's the definitions or roles there?
Well, I mean, again, I just wanted to clarify roles. Just think about how much your company has changed since the pandemic, right? Well, your buyers have changed as well. And I think the number that McKinsey cites is 63% of CEOs have restructured their companies. So I shouldn't be surprised that clients are coming to me saying, Mark, I need a new structure. So again, we go out, we do the research, we talk to their customers, we look at their team, and we make sure that if you have a hunting role, you have a hunter in it. A hunter is somebody that's going out acquiring business, handing it off to for somebody else to manage, and they keep hunting. They're really good at identifying ideal customers and closing that business. And then the farmer, another high value role for a company. Once you have an account, what's our plan to grow them? This year, more than ever, I see a lot of people wanting to do organic growth. So I actually developed some courses on how do we create account plans that achieve growth, greater share of wallet, what have you. Again, farmers, their main job is not to go out and find net new, but to take what you have and grow it strategically. What I say is get your unfair share of the buyer's wallet, right? But then a negative outcome of the pandemic is what I call the babysitter. The babysitter is somebody who manages an account. They don't sell them, they don't grow them. Basically, there's many days where you wonder if that person works for the customer or you. Because they're very vocal about everything you're doing wrong, but they never seem to bring in any new business. They're not growing the account. They're not placing new products. But when their hair gets on fire is when you guys maybe make a mistake or a shipment's late, right? That role has no place in sales right now. That's more of a customer service role. But what might shock people is when I assess a team, I'm finding as high as 20% of the people in sales roles are actually babysitters. They're not willing to pick up the phone and make a sale. They don't even have the skills to close a sale. What they are is just managing an account. So again, my caution to anybody is the way you can identify if you have a babysitter is just look at their numbers. Have you seen some churn in their accounts? Because the only thing they're offering is a transaction. So if they're not giving a lot of value, you're really at risk of a couple of your accounts defecting. So have you seen a couple of accounts defect under a particular person? What is their margin as a comparison to others on your team? Typically, the babysitter has anywhere from 7 to 10% less gross margin because they're not selling, right? They sell based on price, not based on value. New products, what person or people on your team have not successfully placed any of the exciting new products you've invested in. All of those things will help you quickly identify a babysitter. And here's the thing though, a babysitter might be dynamic in a customer service role. So don't discard them, just put them in the right role. And then what that does is it opens up that role for somebody with the skill sets to be an effective salesperson. I think you and I talked last time. So many people are calling me, Mark, I need more people. I need more salespeople. I can't find more people. The first thing I ask is, are you sure you need more? If 20% of the people in sales roles are not performing, what do you say we put salespeople into those roles that you've already budgeted for before we create more overhead, right?
Right.
But then there's, the digital, right?
And before we go to the fisherman, I think another characteristic that I would tag to the babysitter for identifying would be they're the excuse givers and the ones that will justify mediocrity or complacency and are constantly given excuses or deflecting all the external reasons why, whether it's the company side and internal just not hitting the mark or trends, the pandemic, blah, blah, blah. But they're focused on the wrong things and not the solution orientation and, righting the ship.
Well, and I think you bring up a good point because even in our assessment, we look at accountability. And what you just described, they'll blame everybody but themselves when something goes wrong. They'll blame the economy, they'll blame your quality department, they'll blame your shipping department. They're not at all accountable for their own area. So that's a really good point when you're trying to figure out if you have any babysitters. Accountability. They are not focused on the goal. They're not goal driven. And therefore, what they tend to do is what I call blame storming, right? They just blame everybody and it's never them. So that's another, you bring up a good point. That's another indicator you might have a babysitter. But
and I had a guest on before who was an Olympic gold medalist at the Tokyo Olympics in shot put, and he talked about the difference between accountability and ownership. Right. And I think most accountability is one way, and it's top down, right? So there's a lack of intrinsic motivation for the sales team when we talk about accountability. But if they feel ownership, there's a sense of pride. It's they're now responsible versus, and it's, a different type of motivation. It's a want to and a need to motivation versus thou shalt or ought to. And I think if we even change the terminology from accountability to ownership, right, it'll shift the mindset of our salespeople. Like what outcomes, what activities, what things that are going to drive the outcomes do you own? Not accountable for, but that you own. And I think that's the difference. It's like driving the rental car versus one you own and had to work your butt off to get, if you think of like right. As a teenager.
No, I think you bring up a good point, because I often ask that question working with accounts: who owns creating the value proposition? And usually I hear crickets, right? Who owns the value messaging for each persona? Well, unfortunately, if nobody picks up the ball, then sales needs to do it on their own. But that's a great way of looking at it. And actually, who owns your goal?
Yeah.
Obviously, your goal is a part of the bigger goal. You should understand, what role you play. But at the end of the day, top performing salespeople are like athletes. If it's going to be up to me. Now, obviously, you're going to work in a team, but there are no excuses. Like when I lose a sale, I still lose sales today. What could I have done better? That's that continuous improvement mindset, that growth mindset, as opposed to the fixed mindset.
Learning. They invest in themselves. They invest in their
absolutely
clients, and that in advance. And what I talked about on the podcast we did, that value first. You have to go in with value that intrinsically gets people the buy-in where they want to own and be part of it.
Well, and then we move into like the fisherman, right? Interesting. For years, you would say a fisherman's role really wasn't something I wanted. I wanted a farmer or a hunter. But with the digitalization and the whole digital experience, there's a really good place for a fisherman today. To talk about what a fisherman is let's say somebody's approached your company because of a digital asset. Maybe you've put out an ebook. Maybe they've reached out on the internet. Maybe, they attended a webinar. Well, the fisherman knows how to reel them in, right? Create conversations that ultimately lead to revenue. It's not as critical, so to speak, as a hunter role. So, you're not going to spend as much as you would, let's say, on a hunter as you would for a fisherman. But a fisherman understands, where somebody is, when they're coming in to engage. They know when to cut bait. That's another analogy, right? You know Absolutely. What? One of my clients was assessing all their leads, and a very large percent were college students just doing research. Okay, cut bait on that. That is not going to turn into a sale. It's okay. Follow up, give them what they want. They were looking for technical drawings, but cut bait. Don't spend time, don't cold call them. It's not worth it. So Fisherman is really strong in the role as a support vehicle for digital. I see many teams investing in digital. I had one CFO say, I'm really disappointed. The amount of money we spent in digital, we spent what we planned to spend in, 3 years in 3 months. And it's only representing about 10% of sale. But then he went on to say that digital in his company is actually seen as a competition to the current sales team. So I'm like, okay, now we need to reframe that. How do we teach people to embrace those digital assets to ultimately help them hit their numbers? And once again, the fisherman knows all the digital assets you have. They understand the buying process for a lot of different markets. And they know when to use those digital assets at key stages of each buying decision. That's a really valuable role. That's actually a great role that could create a farm team for future hunters if you want to look at it that way.
You bring up a great point, because part of the issue is with these different roles or personas, the hunter, the farmer, the fisherman, the babysitter, is they tend to be siloed and seen as competitive with each other, right, when they have a different time and a place within the overall marketplace. And there is congruency and an ability to synergize that we need to probably rethink the organizational structure and communication and, dare I say, compensation plans and incentives, right, for salespeople to better align those more strategically, because that old mindset and kind of protecting what's, in line of sight is so old school. Not only that, it's a limiting mindset, because you're thinking it's a finite pool, and you and I both know that that's just not the case. There's an abundance and markets that can grow outside of the entire marketplace that currently exists.
Right. And sometimes, again, I have one client where the people in the fisherman role, when an opportunity grows past a certain trigger revenue, they hand it off to outside sales hunters, right? You can work as a team. If an opportunity comes in through a digital experience with an existing account, they can work with the farmer on that team and coach them. Look, this is an opportunity. We think we can get X amount more revenue, greater share of wallet. This person has downloaded these 3 papers. Let's have a really good business conversation. So it doesn't have to feel like a competitor. But then again, quite a few of my clients have full cycle salespeople. So they have to be they have to be the farmer that, grows their current accounts. They have to be the fisherman and see the digital leads that come in. And they have to be the hunter, aggressively going out, trying to get that net new. But what you find is when you analyze it, they're going to fall into one of those buckets just based on the way their psychology is. So why not put people where they can thrive?
Yes. And I think to that point, like, depending on what stage the business is at,
true,
you're going to have what you have until it grows to the point where those get separated, but knowing where that person's strengths and that. So as the career progression comes in, and they then have the benefit of learning the other roles and the place they play, and still place a portion of their time there, even though they're naturally driven in one of those areas. And then right, as the team builds, the ability to collaborate and, synergize is that much better too, even when, one person has to fill all 3 buckets. We don't necessarily want babysitters. You want them in those other 3. And then
again, my challenge is you want that sales team operating like that efficient plant, right? So first, figure out what roles you need to grow your business strategically, and then make sure you put the right people in the right roles. I mean, if you want to have a terrible experience, put a farmer in a hunter role, because what they're going to do is spend all their time on current accounts and you're going to be frustrated. Or put a hunter in a farmer role. They're going to go out, keep talking to net new business, which, oh, by the way, is the most expensive thing you can do, where what you wanted them to do was grow current accounts, which is, much shorter cycle and much more profitable. So it's really key. And that's where I enjoy using the assessment instruments, because, if somebody's in a wrong role, let's try to adjust them. If for whatever reason we can't make that adjustment, maybe we're too small of a company, then what skills do they need to be effective until we can grow and use them 100% in the role that they're gifted in? It actually gives you an unfair advantage, right? It puts the right people in the right role.
I love it. And I think you've really hit on some key points, not just for the sales-based organizations, but for business in general. Like,
yeah,
you have to realize the first thing on an income statement for any business is sales and revenue. So, every business is having to think about this and, the approach and, not just having metrics, but making sure it's the right metrics and not just overweighting on all these lagged metrics like profit and the things that come after the fact, but what are some of the drivers of that? And not just activity-based stuff, because we know how salespeople can justify activity to compensate for a lack of results. We need to make sure we're measuring the right things. And I know, based on our conversations and, your results, that you've kind of cracked that nut. So we will make sure that we give your information and how people can get a hold of you, Mark, and looking forward to having you on future podcasts and doing more, not just in 2022 as we've talked, but going forward. Any final thoughts or things that you would want the audience to know as we look forward from here we're in Q1 of 2022 over the next year to 5 years?
Yeah. And again, I just want to reinforce, it's so key to have the right people in the right role, but it's also key to have the right terms of trade based on the account. What we saw happen in the pandemic is, businesses were down maybe 5%, but net, they were more profitable because they didn't have travel and entertainment expense, right? They didn't have people renting cars, taking airplane rides. So what I'm seeing in 2022 is CFOs are now aligning much closer with the VPs of sales and really challenging. How many times do we need to see that account? Maybe we have a hybrid approach. Maybe we have their account all EDI. Maybe, take a more strategic look at how you serve and the cost to serve. We could save that for the next time. But again, the net profit by customer is what people are going to be focusing on more in 2022 and beyond. But thank you for having me, and I'm always here to help your community.
Thank you. And because I know you're a very busy guy and a success in your own right, we always like to know, what are some of your success principles, like 1 to 3 success principles that you use to keep yourself kind of top of the game?
Well, again, continuous improvement. I follow, quite a bit of articles, podcasts, ebooks. I attend webinars. I pay for training for myself, right? So continuous improvement. We've mentioned in the past, my faith keeps me grounded, right? Yeah. Humbly, always walking into every opportunity with trying not to have a lot of preconceived notions. And then data. I think the businesses have changed so much in the last 24 months. We can't count on that gut and intuition like we used to. We have a lot of bias. So what I like to do is, what does the data tell us? What story is it telling? And then how can we use our experience and training as opposed to our intuition? With those 3 things, typically we can have a pretty good experience and grow companies profitably.
I love that. And I mean, the first 2, we're aligned. That last one, I think the use of data, one, validates intuition, and then we're able to leverage the data with our experience in that. So love it, and looking forward to seeing greater success for you and your family. And thank you again for coming on the show, Mark.
Well, thanks for having me. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you, Hop Nation, for tuning in this week for another wonderful episode. And if you haven't already, again, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, like us, and share with friends. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you.